last Friday. Something incredible happened, right? Like, I mean, a company IPO'd, went straight to $2 trillion, created SpaceX. They created the first trillionaire in history, in Elon Musk, who himself said that if you had told him that that would be the outcome, he'd tell you that you were smoking something. That's his words, not mine. So, and he can say it,
and we can imagine.
And
him
he's
doing
got
it.
he's got he's got society changing money now, right? But like, this is a company that has got a, if you believe it, it's got like, and you got all the biggest brands and leaders in financial services talking about it. It's a $28 trillion opportunity if you believe everything, but it's also a company that makes $5 billion in loss, right? Is this the classic example? What do you tell your customers when they're saying that FOMO is kicking in, saying, "Hey, my mate got in early"? Do you get them? What's the answer? Get them early into SpaceX. Don't get into SpaceX right now. What's
Okay, so you've just asked a couple of different questions, and I'll try to answer them. We do our best to get access to our clients to interesting private opportunities.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we try to do. You can't always tell whether those opportunities are going to pan out or not,
or whatever,
or whether you get the allocation. I'm not at liberty to say whether we're actually active in the SpaceX deal itself, but we've been active of late.
Okay.
Now, what do you say to somebody if they come to you?
Were you in Texas last Friday? No, sorry.
What do you say to someone if they say, "Hey, SpaceX is a great deal at $2 trillion"?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think we'll find out in the future. Now, one reality is that SpaceX and all of these large companies will be part of indices, and we will get access to them when we invest in our ETFs, etc. So from a certain perspective, you don't need to chase the individual name because it will, in all likelihood, be part of a global index, a US index, etc. And you'll get exposure to it as an investor.
So what you're saying is my VOO that he hates has SpaceX in it already, or will do soon.
It will at some point.
And the UCITS do too. What's your take on it when I agree with the get rich quick kind of ideas when people come to you with that?
It's rubbish, isn't it? I mean, get rich quick thing. That's not the way that you should be thinking about growing wealth, right? So, but Zal's right.
But the crypto bros will tell you that that's.
But these crypto bros, they just put their money in Bitcoin, and then it seems like they're geniuses. I don't know. I don't find that so compelling. I don't think they've done anything super smart. They've just managed to put their money into a coin that's done well. Okay, that's good for them, but don't try and make it out as though you've done something really special, So, I mean, I think personally, I agree with Zal in terms of you're going to get exposure to it anyway in an ETF at some point. I've done a video on this recently, actually. Yeah. I think sort of like 10, 15 days off the bat, you're going to be only exposed about 0.05, 0.6%, 0.06%. So less than 0.1% in a global sort of tracker, right? Like VWRA.
Yeah.
And S&P won't allow it to go into the index until the end of 2027. Or the earliest in June 2027. But I think for investors, the private placement and what I love about public markets is you are on the same playing field, whether you're Temasek or just a guy who earns $3,000 a month, because you are buying the exact same underlying.
Yeah.
What I don't like about private assets, because I see private assets being hawked a lot, is that there's going to be preferential access. They might get an allocation. You might not get an allocation.
But okay, so this brings, it's more like this is a segue. Actually, a beautiful segue to the next question I had for you. That's changing, right? Tokenization, miniaturization is coming. So you could buy access to the Carlyle Group now. Once upon a time, the reason I told you the story about mutual funds is that mutual funds had a very exclusionary criteria of $200,000 and more. Then came ETFs and took the floor out of that. That's happening in your the field you play in. So two questions to both of you. I'd love to get your views on tokenization. Does that excite you? Does that say that that's more instruments that can give people access? And then does that worry you because you're like, oh my God, like the one bastion that we had is sort of like getting blown out?
I personally, it scares me. Like if you're talking about a liquid vehicle backed by illiquid assets, I couldn't think of a worse recipe in terms of like an investment proposal for the average investor. So in that perspective, something I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But that's me personally, So I think it depends on what people would like
But again,
to.
But then it goes back to your question, is it about risk appetite, or, like if you've got $10,000 of spare cash versus $10 million of spare cash, does that change things?
I mean, look.
Sorry, I just asked you a second question, but you might want to answer the first one first.
Very quickly, answer the first question. Do I like the idea of democratization of private assets, that the little guy can get access to something that heretofore only the big guy could get access to? Absolutely, I like that idea. Now, are you going to execute that in a way that's fair and transparent? That's another question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tim just pointed out, this mismatch sometimes between liquidity reality and liquidity expectations. We saw that recently in the private credit space. People thought these semi-liquid funds could, were essentially pretty liquid. They didn't focus on the semi part of that phrase, and they realized that, oh my gosh, there are gates, you know? So this was an example of maybe mis-selling or mismatched expectations. Okay, but I like the idea of democratization of private assets in general if it's done properly.
So I did an exercise recently where, and I wrote about it. Like I took my, IBKR, so I have most of my stock there. So I gave it to Claude, and I said, I also gave it my blood work. Different story. But I'm all in on AI, as you can see. But I gave it to them, and it came back with like a really, actually quite a intelligent view of my, not entirely correct, but but almost like 90% accurate. And it gave me some. So there are people who are today going and just swearing by that. That worries me. But for me, in that situation, it gave me a bunch of questions to ask my financial advisor, whoever that is, whether it's talking to you guys, talking to the actual people who are paid to sort of do that, Are we heading to a situation where people come in and with annoying doctors and have self-diagnosed themselves a little bit? That in this case could be a good thing. Let's start with you, Tim, and then how that works for the.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great tool. Again, it's how you use AI, right? I mean, I think there are so many cases where people just outsource their brains to it, whether it's investing, whether it's self-diagnosing, whether it's how to write something, and then just sending out. I've seen emails where it's, you got the next prompt in the email, and you're like, geez, come on, could you not at least have proofread that email before you sent it? But that kind of example, it's just
making
almost
people lazy. I have to say.
So it's almost like don't outsource your brain and proof check things, make sure you double check the data, make sure it's correct. And I think if you do that, it's a great tool to save you time, and it can help explain concepts from the investment perspective in a much more easy to understand, digestible format. So I would say, it's great. But when it comes to your asset allocation, your goals, all these other things that it needs to take into account, I think there is still a value add to a human element and a relationship there. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Which one? Wait, Tim.
We are going to be
either you're getting tired or you're getting honest.
Look, I mean,
which one it is.
We're going to be using AI more and more, whether that be companies using AI to become more efficient, individual end consumers or consuming companies using AI to sort of optimize and understand their product set. And therefore be able to ask more intelligent questions. Those are realities that are sweeping across all industries, and I don't think financial services are going to be any different or exempt from that. So that's a reality that we're dealing with. And I think that AI is, it's going to be intelligent firms and firms that are far-sighted are going to harness it effectively, but to continue to build on what humans can do that machines cannot. I believe it.